I'm out here today at Miami Zoo using the Tamron 50-400mm lens for the Nikon Z system. This is a lens that just came out here in September of 2024. It's a lens that's been out for a while now with the Sony system, has really awesome reviews. I've seen a couple on YouTube talking about the Nikon just before it became available to everybody. And this is actually my second time using it. I was doing some sunrise photos and it was amazing to be able to go do landscape sunrise photos with a 50-400mm range. I'm going to see how it works out here today at Zoo Miami. Hopefully I get some good opportunities to photograph different animals, and maybe I'll be lucky and get some action so I can see how good the autofocus works. I've already had an opportunity to photograph a couple of birds, nothing flying. I was able to go ahead and turn on the bird eye autofocus tracking and see how well it picks up a bird's eye. I'm going to go ahead now and walk around and look for photo opportunities and give you some more feedback and thoughts on this gear today. I'm going to provide a couple of thoughts as to why I made the choice to purchase the Tamron brand 50-400mm lens over the Nikon Z 100-400mm lens. This lens is a 6.3 at its widest aperture when you're zoomed out all the way, opposed to the Nikon being a 5.6. Some of the reasons that I chose to purchase the Tamron is that I looked into reviews of the Sony version of this lens, and all the reviews were like super good. I managed to find just a handful of reviews on the Nikon one. The image quality, everybody said it was great, really good sharpness. One of the main reasons actually for a 1-400 for me is actually for travel. I've been seeing a lot of videos where photographers are talking about how they use a 1-400mm lens for their landscape photography, and it's something that I hope to do more of with this lens. Let me talk to you a little bit about some of the settings that I've done on the lens. What I've done is the custom function button right there. I've gone ahead and set that button so that when I press it, it'll take the focus box and place it back in the center. So that's the choice I've made thus far as the custom function button on the Tamron 50-400mm lens. So the setting that I changed the manual focus ring to right here is for ISO. So what I've done by turning the manual focus ring is I can go ahead and select my ISO, which has come in really handy for some of the photography out here today, especially when you're dealing with an aperture of 6.3 with a 50-400mm lens. You're going to have to really adjust that ISO accordingly many times. One thing that I'm finding that I'm pretty happy with is the throw when you're zooming in and out is very short on the lens. So you're not having to readjust your hand or anything when you're trying to zoom in and out with the lens. The front of the lens does extend, nothing too bad. I've actually seen worse than that. So I'm not dissatisfied with that at all. A little bit of tightness to it, but I think it's perfect amount of tension. And you know, the lens doesn't creep or anything like that. It does have a lock so that you can go ahead and lock it to keep it from creeping. But thus far, it hasn't been an issue for me. I just had a great opportunity to photograph the sloth bear. The bear has 2 babies with it. I was fortunate where the zookeeper came, feed him some coconuts. The bears were really happy about it. They started running around and trying to crack open the coconut and gave me some opportunities for some photographs. It was quite a challenge. I'm not going to judge the lens, not even the camera system, on whether I got these pictures in focus or not, because I'm having to bump up the ISO really high. It's a black animal and they're in a very shaded area. Sometimes they'll get into an area where there's some sun creeping in. The autofocus box, as far as getting on the eye, wasn't really getting on there very often, but you know, I could barely see the eyes. I don't think it's something to judge the lens or the camera for. I did have a couple of opportunities where the bear took off running. I was keeping that shutter speed pretty high. I think I might have been in the 1250 range. I'm dealing with the dark bear with the dark eyes. Now it's running. Very high ISOs. The image quality is probably going to be a little rough on it because of the fact that I'm sure I was still even underexposing a little bit. As I was walking, I came up on the aviary, and at first I wasn't going to bother with it but I thought it'd be a good opportunity to see if I could find some birds that would actually have some decent light on them, and maybe I could test the bird and eye autofocus tracking. And I did get an opportunity to go ahead and photograph the birds. The focus box was getting on the eye of the bird. For this photo here, I went ahead and flipped out the screen on the Nikon Z8 and held it close to the ground so that I could get a composition of this bird where I can get that black background, and the face was really being lit up nicely by the sun. And the focus box was getting on the eye of the bird, and I'm hoping to actually have a nice image of that. Another factor in my decision to purchase the Tamron 50-400mm lens, as I said, I'd seen a lot of good reviews on it, but also the price. You can buy two of these lenses for the price of one Nikon Z 100-400mm lens. I believe it's just a third of a stop between the 5.6 and 6.3. I'm going to end up having to bump up the ISO all the time at 5.6 and 6.3, you know, it's just a little bit more. I thought it was worth checking out this lens and giving it a chance because of all the great reviews that I've seen. Thus far, I'm very happy with it. I've come to the zoo many times with just like a 1-400mm range. A 1-400 is almost the perfect lens. The one thing I love about it is that it's light. You're not as tired because you're not carrying all this weight around from a much bigger lens. And also the fact that it's you know, compact for what it is. I feel like it's much easier to go ahead and bend down and perhaps hold that camera down close to the floor to get pictures. It's just more convenient experience when you're photographing with the 1-400mm lens. Some of the specs on the Tamron 50-400mm lens for Nikon. The lens is a 4.5 to 6.3 aperture. The lens does get to 6.3 very fast. Once you start zooming in, 4.5 is basically at that 50mm range. You quickly get to 4.8 once you zoom in just to 70mm. When you get to 100mm, the lens already closes down to 5.3. At 135mm, the lens closes down to 5.6. At about 150mm, the lens closes down to f6. The lens becomes 6.3 at just 200mm, and from there on all the way to 400mm, 6.3 is the best you can do. The lens filter diameter is 67mm, which is something that Tamron does probably the best job of any lens manufacturer of trying to keep the filter diameter on all their lenses the same. The lens without the camera body weighs 2.6 pounds, and the dimensions are 3.5 by 7.3. So it's not a very long lens for the zoom range on it. Nikon 100-400mm lens is definitely much heavier and much longer. The Nikon lens also does extend a little bit the front barrel when you zoom out. This one I would say extends about twice as much, but to me is actually shorter than 1-400mm lenses that I've had before. For example, my Canon 100-400mm lens that I used to own, I felt extended much further out. For these images of the okapi, I actually ended up using a pretty high ISO. Even though I'm overexposing that background, I had to do that in order to get a good exposure for the animal. I'm gonna end up cropping quite a bit. I was trying to get a headshot. The 400mm wasn't enough to just compose for the headshot, but I shot in a way where I can go ahead and crop in a little bit later. So it'll be interesting to see how well the image quality holds up after I crop in a good 50% to get that headshot that I'm envisioning. So I had an opportunity where I saw these birds walking down the pathway, and I decided to get down low and see if I could get a nice headshot of these birds, and that gave me an opportunity to see how the bird and eye autofocus tracking on the Tamron 50-400mm lens performed. The African painted dog is one of my favorite animals to photograph here at the zoo, but it's also one of the more challenging ones. And the reason for that is they're in an area where it is bright hot spots in some locations and dark spots in others. I mean, you're just bouncing that ISO all over the place when photographing them. And for that reason, I'm actually finding it really advantageous that I set the focus ring on the 50-400mm Tamron lens to be the ISO option, where I can raise and lower the ISO as needed. Kind of like zooming in and out. I'm just, with my thumb, I'm just turning the ring, as you can see right here, so that I can select my ISOs up and down. And then obviously I'm zooming in and out here And this has really worked out well for these photos of the African painted dog. Usually they give me a bit more opportunities where they running around a little bit. You see right here with my thumb, I'm going ahead and turning the ISO wheel, and then I'm zooming in, and the focus box is right on that right eye of the African painted dog, and I think hopefully I have a nice image. So these images of the Adra gazelle, originally I started out with a small focus box, and I was having some issues getting it on the eye of the animal. I think I had a bit more success once I went ahead and made for a wider box and allowed it to get on the eye. Now, in regards to using the focus ring as an ISO ring, I'm really enjoying that, finding it quite useful, and I think it's something that I will continue to use at least a couple more times and see if that's the way I want to go with it. One thing I'm liking about it is that it's a really fast way of bracketing your exposures by turning the ISO up and down. The lens does have a USB-C connection, so all you got to do is connect it to the USB and your computer to go ahead and program different features. This photo of the Arabian Oryx, I just wanted to see how well the camera could perform. I did the composition where the grass is kind of overgrown. It looked a little bit like it might be out in nature, not at a zoo. I'm gonna actually take another one right now because looks like the clouds have covered the sun up a bit, and that'll keep that white fur on it from blowing out. And what I did is I actually got up on the bench and got a different composition at a little bit of a higher angle. I ran across another exhibit of the okapi. It had a nice environment around it where you can make it look like it's out in nature. For this one, I shot some headshots that I will end up having to crop into it. But what I like about it is I'm zoomed out all the way to 400 millimeters. Whenever I see a lizard, I always think that's a good opportunity to see just how well the autofocus system performs. And I spotted this lizard down on the ground, and I thought it was a good opportunity to see how well the eye autofocus tracking would get on the lizard using this lens. You know, through the viewfinder, it looked like it was doing a really nice job of getting the focus box on the eye of the lizard, and I managed to get off a couple of images. I did have it on animal eye autofocus tracking for this image. Another animal that can give you some interesting opportunities. You see them everywhere, but it's a squirrel in this part of the zoo. They're much more fidgety and shy of people. They don't give you too many opportunities to get close to them to get a photo off. But I managed to get a couple of images off. I also got a couple of images of a squirrel that ran up into the tree. I kind of liked the way it was composed in the location that it was at. I had an opportunity to take a couple of photos of the giraffes. It was kind of interesting because the focus box was actually getting confused with the nose of the giraffe. A lot of times try to get it back up by moving the joystick and placing the box on the eye, but it would go right back to that nose. Giraffe has pretty big eyes, even though they're dark, but it's not dark around the eye, so I don't understand exactly why it was selecting a nose instead of the eye of the giraffe. And one thing I was hoping for in my outing out here to the zoo was to try the macro feature of the 50 to 400 millimeter Tamron lens, but I haven't had any real opportunities. I'm not seeing a lot of flowers this time of year out here. It's actually, I'm seeing less than usual. I do have a place that I like to go to that's a botanical garden, and I'll see if there's some opportunities there to do some macro photography, and that way I can have some photos so that I can see how well it performs with the close-up images. The Tamron 50 to 400 millimeter lens is supposed to be able to focus as close as 9.8 inches. It has a magnification ratio of 0.5 times and a macro reproduction of 1.2. Really a nice performing lens for macro photography. And that's another great reason that this would be a great travel lens. I am using the battery grip for the Nikon Z8, and I do recommend having a battery grip once you get to lenses of this size on the camera. It makes it a little easier to hold. The lens does not feel front heavy or anything like that. It does not feel awkward at all. As far as battery life, I've taken about 676 images. I finally have exhausted one battery completely. Stopped at the eagle exhibit to see if there was an opportunity to get a couple of headshots of the eagle. One of them was up on the tree and another one was down on the ground. The one up on the tree has a man-made canopy behind it and fencing, and I didn't feel like it was gonna make for a good photograph. The one on the ground, I took a couple of photos where I have a man-made wall behind it. I kept working the area and I found a spot where I could shoot through the fencing and get green grass behind it, so that's a little bit more of a nature look. So I got a couple of nice headshots. Again, on these I'm gonna have to go ahead and crop, but it'll be a good test to see just how sharp the lens is, because I shot all the way out at 400 millimeters, and then I'm going to go ahead and have to crop in a little bit. Spotted an opportunity to take some photos of Nahinga. I thought it was a good opportunity to try and capture some images where I could really zoom out all the way in. And I was at 400 millimeters for these photos, and It'll be interesting to see just how much I can throw out that background. The bird was doing a couple of neat things, walking around a little bit on the branch and also opening its mouth a couple of times, and I thought it'd give me good photo opportunities. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this little preview of the Tamron 50-400mm lens. Very happy with the purchase thus far, but like I said, I just got it. I've only had it a few days, but so far my photo opportunities with it have been a pleasant experience. So we'll see if I can go ahead and work on some more videos, and I'll put some more thoughts together for you guys. Please like and subscribe, and I thank you for watching.